Bryce here, I think it's really important. Someone that I have met like once, a very brief talk, and asked for a picture, and he was so nice. It was before the postseason series, Dodgers Padres, or before one of the games. No Dodger blue in the house. He saw a blue Sharpie and was like, "No Dodger blue in the house. I'll get you a brown pen." Just such a nice human being. Someone that would reply to fan emails, like little things like that. And then the stuff that he did in the
Yeah.
community was so great.
Yeah.
What's like a big story? Is it the midnight walks? What stands out to you about
Well,
him?
there were so many of them. Sometimes he'd just wanna, if you wanted to talk to him and meet you, he'd like walking around the park during a game. So sometimes you just walk around Petco and he'd have conversations. Some people, even back then, fewer people knew who he was. He became as known as the players by the end, just because he had worked so hard and spent so much money to try to compete in this town. It's almost like he had achieved which he didn't want any level of fame compared to players, because he was a pretty humble man. But yeah, he would talk about his efforts with the homeless. I walked around with he and his brother Tom Seidler in the around the park, Imperial, some of the homeless areas, talking to people. They would do that. I've been in meetings where they had a group that met weekly with local leaders who were trying to take on homeless issues in the community, and they were making strides. But he said he liked it partly for his health. He needed the exercise too, but he would walk around Pacific Beach up and down the boardwalk late at night. And I went on a couple of those walks with him, and we'd walk into the 7-Eleven by PB Ale House there, and he would just, he didn't stand out. I mean, he looked like just average Joe kind of guy walking into the 7-Eleven, but he'd grab a couple hot dogs and bring them out to the guys sitting out front at 7-Eleven. But you could tell none of it was made up or contrived, because the night manager would say behind the desk, "Hey, my man," like obviously had seen him before.
Yeah.
He had been in there, recognized him. And we'd spend a lot of time walking down the boardwalk talking about things. But if he saw somebody who was homeless, he would check in on them and say, "Hey, how you doing? Everything okay?" And I saw this so many times. It wasn't the value of what he was. Very disarming. He just had a really incredible soft touch where he could approach a stranger like that and they didn't freak out. There was a warmth there that felt genuine, I think. And you got a lot of people that a value that we sometimes forget about when you see people who are less fortunate. They just want seen and heard. They want acknowledged as people. They want they want to talk to somebody. They want to, they don't want you to rush past and ignore. And he did that. He engaged. He would have conversations. He would among his best skills, which you don't see with people with a lot of power and money, and somebody who owns a professional franchise, just an incredible listener. He would listen, and the power of that gets lost in this era today, where we all bark and argue with each other, and do people truly listen anymore? And he was kind of the master at the power of listening. He did it all the time. But I'm even thinking, I wrote a story about opening day. There was a battlefield nurse from the Vietnam War who had PTSD, and he heard that story, and her and her son were going to miss opening day for the first time. Tickets were getting harder to get. And he got a hold of me and he said, "I'm going to have him in the owner's box with me." He goes, "I don't want you writing about it." I didn't write about it. I wanted to. But her and her son didn't miss opening day, because he said, "Well, I know where I can find a few seats. They can sit in the box with me." And he did lots of things like that he didn't want attention for. So you just saw, probably in summary, you just saw this kindness at all turns with Peter Seidler that felt uncommon to me. Just as a person, it felt uncommon, but especially for somebody who is, we hear all the stories of The Oakland A's hated owners who were moving teams and pinching pennies and don't care about their communities. He was the polar opposite of all that. And so that was one of the many reasons Peter Seidler was an incredible person and why it's such a huge loss to San Diego.
For sure. Yeah. Beautiful stuff right there from Bryce Miller. Bryce, thank you so much for the time. We could definitely use more Peter Seidlers in the world for sure.